An hour north of New York City, a band of deadly gunmen descended on a peaceful suburban community. They struck quickly and savagely. Agents learned that the gang's leader had been living underground for more than 2 decades. The FBI's New York Anti-Terrorist Task Force hoped they could find this most wanted fugitive before he killed again.
A series of armored car heists and bloody shootouts shocked law enforcement. The brutal violence of the crimes suggested a motive more complex than greed. When the robbers started targeting police, the FBI took charge. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Agents would expend thousands of man-hours to stop an armed gang that terrorized New York.
Rockland County, New York, 1981. The burgeoning suburb just 20 miles north of New York City had become a refuge of former city dwellers. Most left their urban homes in pursuit of safer, more affordable neighborhoods for their families. They enjoyed more open space and lower crime rates. The town of Nanuet was typical and drew many people to its new mall. At 3:40, October 20th, 1981, a Brinks armored truck made its regularly scheduled pickup from a retailer. One guard remained in the truck while another watched the doors. The third returned with cash and receipts. With no warning, a gang of masked men burst out of a red van. One guard was hit in the throat, another was hit in the arm. The gunman then trained with weapons on the driver. He shot back, but the assailant's gunfire was overwhelming. One guard managed to climb into the back of the truck for protection.
All right, Charlie, let's go.
Police Chief Alan Colsey of the South Nyack Grandview Police Department was 5 miles away when he received the call. Officers from other nearby towns were also called, since Nanuet was too small to support its own police force.
In October of 1981, when the Brinks case occurred, it was an extremely shocking event for the entire area of Rockland County. For the Nyack community, for the Clarkstown community, this was something that they had never expected to ever see.
Clarkstown police and paramedics arrived first. They placed one guard on life support, hoping he would survive the ride to the hospital. Brinks guard Peter Page would never get that chance. A gunshot had severed major arteries in his right shoulder and neck. He died before help arrived. The uninjured driver said though the gunman had worn masks, he believed they were black males. They sped off in a red van. From a deposit log, police learned that $1.6 million was missing. $1.3 million remained in the truck. Chief Colsey received updates as he raced to the crime scene.
The first information coming in from the Nanuet scene was that the suspects had been seen escaping in a red van. They were eastbound on Route 59. This would take them along a route adjacent to the New York State Thruway, which leads directly into New York City over the Tappan Zee Bridge.
Moments later, a local resident close to the mall reported seeing masked gunmen in a parking lot, transferring sacks and weapons into a small moving truck. The witness told Clarkstown police that the vehicles exited eastbound. Detective Arthur Keenan and 2 other police cruisers were on Route 59, close to the Thruway entrance when they received the update.
We proceeded on to Route 59 near the New York State Thruway to see if we would see the getaway vehicle. We went to that area figuring that would be a getaway route.
When the officers arrived at the intersection of Mountain View Road and Interstate 87, they noticed a moving truck waiting to turn left onto the Thruway. Keenan ordered 1 patrol unit to block the on-ramp. Then, Detective Keenan received a call about a second moving truck.
At that time, there was a radio transmission from the Orangetown police that they had a U-Haul truck heading southbound on Route 304 near the New Jersey line, which was approximately the same distance from the Nanuet Mall as we were.
Unsure if the truck on Route 59 was the suspect's, Sergeant Edward O'Grady and Detective Keenan blocked the truck. Officers Brian Lennon and Waverly Chip Brown approached the drivers.
The suspects were described as being black males. At the intersection, we observed the driver and passenger as being white individuals.
Yeah.
The woman objected to the shotgun. Sergeant O'Grady directed Lennon to return the gun to the patrol car. They believed they had stopped the wrong truck.
On the boulevard westbound.
As Lennon secured the gun, the detective inspected the back of the moving truck. Though it didn't appear locked, the back door wouldn't open. He told the couple that he wanted to see what was inside.
I couldn't understand why it wouldn't open. I wanted to know what was in the back of the truck. And then instantly, as I was said that, a noise came from the truck. I turned and all the suspects were coming out of the back shooting.
The rounds from the officers' 6-shot revolvers bounced off the bulletproof vests worn by the armed gang. Officer Lennon rushed back to his patrol car for his shotgun. Officer Brown was shot in the neck and shoulder and fell to the ground. Even if the officers were wearing their vests, it wouldn't have helped.
We were at a disadvantage. In addition to which, the ammunition that was being used in the M16 was capable of going through vests.
As the masked gunman approached, one executed Officer Brown at point-blank range. Detective Keenan was hit in the leg and ran for cover.
I was still being fired at. Even after I took cover, I had shots go between my legs. The tree that I was behind took a shot chest high.
Officer Lennon had unlocked his shotgun but was taking heavy fire. The gunman rammed the police car, trying to clear it for their escape. It didn't work. Then, 2 cars arrived at the scene. The suspects gathered the money bags and piled into the cars. One suspect never made it to a getaway car. A passing motorist grabbed the woman who had been a passenger in the truck and prevented her escape. He watched the white Oldsmobile and tan Honda speed away. Officers Keenan and Lennon rushed to help their injured colleagues.
As the suspects made their getaway, I went to both Waverly Brown and Eddie O'Grady to see if there was anything I could do for them. Waverly Brown and Eddie were both beyond any medical attention that I could administer.
Still en route, Chief Alan Colsey's main focus now was to find the fleeing vehicles, but reports were scattered and hard to decipher.
It was very, very difficult at this particular time to get a clear, open communication from anyone out in the field back to a desk area because of the number of communications that were literally stepping on one another.
As the chief approached the area, he determined that the crime scene didn't need any more personnel or vehicles. He set out to find those responsible.
I didn't want to interfere with the emergency response in that area. The road was completely blocked. So knowing that this particular escape route would lead them in a particular direction, I made a U-turn at Mountain View and 59 and traced my steps back.
He figured the suspects would travel towards New York City, where there was potential for a greater loss of life. He believed their route would take them along Mountain View Avenue to a T intersection.
I figured there was a 50-50 shot that they were either going to go east or west, and that I could cover at least one of those avenues of escape, and went immediately to that area as quickly as I could. In fact, en route to that particular intersection, I observed the suspect vehicles, two of them, at a high rate of speed heading east on Christian Herald Road.
The chief followed the cars. He radioed in his position and asked for backup.
It was clear to me, based upon the events that had transpired up until that point, that these were extremely dangerous individuals who had no compulsion or no regard for human life and no hesitancy to take the utmost of violent actions against anybody who would stand in their way.
Until units arrived, it would be up to him to stop two vehicles that held 6 heavily armed cop killers. After following for a few minutes, the chief noticed that 2 passengers in the Honda had ducked out of sight, perhaps to load guns.
As we get to the corner of 6th and Broadway, the Oldsmobile makes a right-hand turn onto Broadway going south into the middle of town, and the tan Honda attempts to do the same, but slides, skids across the road.
The chief positioned his car between himself and the fugitives. He drew his gun and continued to call for backup, hoping his voice could be heard over the clamor of simultaneous calls.
I continually order the suspects out of the vehicle. There's a period of a few seconds where nothing in fact happens. And then the door opens up and I see a female put her feet out onto the roadway and remain seated in the front seat of the car.
The chief repeated his commands to exit the vehicle with their hands in the air. The woman then began to reach behind the seat, perhaps for a gun. Then, a second occupant walked towards the officer, wearing a bulletproof vest.
Despite my repeated orders to the contrary, one of the suspects came walking up towards me. The female was attempting to reach around and get something which I immediately assumed to be a weapon.
The chief was outnumbered, and neither of the suspects obeyed his orders. He made one more desperate call for backup.
Driver!
On October 20th, 1981, the Nyack, New York police chief had stopped one of 2 getaway cars filled with suspects from an armored car robbery that had left 3 dead and 2 wounded. As he continued to call for backup, one suspect reached behind her seat. Another approached the chief wearing a bulletproof vest. He was outnumbered, and neither of the suspects obeyed his orders. As the chief made one last desperate radio call, backup arrived.
What do you got? Got 2, got 1 in the back seat. Get on the ground, face down! On the ground, get on the ground, face down!
They secured the scene and pulled a 3rd suspect from the back seat. Police believed that he had been an armed lookout for the other 2, but was injured and dropped his weapon when their getaway car careened out of control. Police searched the car. In the trunk, they recovered sacks that held in excess of $1 million. Under the front seat, they found a loaded 9mm pistol, the weapon the woman had likely been reaching for. Thousands attended the funeral for the officers slain at the October 20th shootout. The entire community shared the grief felt by Detective Arthur Keenan at the loss of his colleagues.
The death of my two friends, Chipper Brown and Eddie O'Grady, definitely affected my life from that point forward. When you're in a small community like that, in a small police department like that, you go to each other's weddings and christenings and barbecues and things of that nature, and it becomes like a secondary family of sorts. And so it was very devastating to lose two of your good friends.
The four murder suspects, including the woman captured at the roadblock, maintained their silence while arraigned at Nyack Village Hall. Police had no way to know how many more were still at large.
The law enforcement community in Rockland County was taken greatly by surprise by the sequence and magnitude of the events. This was really a small assault team that came to Rockland County to rob this Brinks truck, and it was a magnitude and a seriousness and a firepower that had never been seen anywhere in the law enforcement community here.
If Nyack police were not used to such violence, 30 miles south in New York City, the FBI and New York City police certainly were. The New York Joint Terrorism Task Force had already been investigating a series of armored car heists throughout the region that had been executed in a similar fashion. Now retired Special Agent Lou Vesey was a member of that team. He believed the Nyack robbery was connected to the others.
The people who had done Nyack had to have some involvement with all these other crimes. I mean, because the MO was absolutely identical. The whites were driving the vehicles, the blacks had done the robberies, the weapons that were used were identical to the weapons that had been used in the other robberies we were looking at. So there was no doubt in anybody's mind that this was at least some of the same group.
The suspects were processed at the Rockland County Jail. When asked for their names, all gave aliases, except one. Judy Clark, arrested in the getaway car, was no stranger to the FBI. To agents, she was known as a member of the Weather Underground, a radical group involved in many violent robberies and bombings in the 1960s and 70s. For the Brinks robbery, she would be sentenced to 75 years in prison. Special Agent Lou Vesey was an expert on the Weather Underground.
One female I recognized immediately as Judy Clark, who had been someone who had been under investigation previously by us as a possible terrorist. There was another female there who I thought looked very familiar.
Agent Vesey suspected the woman arrested at the roadblock was Kathy Boudin, another member of the Weather Underground. A fingerprint check confirmed it. Boudin pled guilty and was sentenced to 20 years in prison for acting as a decoy passenger in the moving truck. They discovered one of the men to be David Gilbert, Boudin's common-law husband, who was also a member of the Weather Underground. He received 75 years for his role. Sam Brown, who had been injured in the getaway car, was an associate of the Black Liberation Army, another militant group. Like Gilbert and Clark, Brown was sentenced to 75 years in prison. 4 members of the gang were behind bars. From survivors' statements, agents estimated at least 7 more were out on the streets. Special Agent Ken Maxwell joined the investigation to help determine who and where the remaining fugitives might be. One new lead held promise. The second getaway car had been found a few miles away.
The Oldsmobile was found in Westchester County, dumped or abandoned. Inside, there was a great deal of blood, indicating that whoever had abandoned the vehicle had been wounded during the shootout.
Agents checked local hospitals for gunshot victims. They found no patients whose whereabouts were unaccounted for on the day of the shootout.
Other cases, the bombing cases, even after.
The Oldsmobile was registered to a woman at an apartment on Prospect Street in East Orange, New Jersey. They suspected that the armed fugitives had taken refuge there. Agents obtained a search warrant. They found no one inside and began to process the apartment.
The location in East Orange, New Jersey was a treasure trove of evidence. It's what we commonly refer to as a safe house. Inside that safe house, the New Jersey State Police and the FBI located a tremendous amount of documentary evidence indicating other safe houses, other vehicles used by these subjects, and also photographs and other forms of identification that began to unravel the mystery as to who was involved.
One key name investigators discovered on rent receipts was the legal name of the tenant, Marilyn Jean Buck. The FBI knew her name and history. She was a known operative of the Black Liberation Army and its only white member.
Well, Marilyn Buck had a long history of her involvement with radical politics, if you will. At the time of the robbery, she was a fugitive who had gone underground and was wanted on weapons charges.
What is that?
Agents also found a bomb-making manual, diagrams of 6 police precincts, and a hit list naming civic and business leaders. They turned up more false IDs, disguises, a shotgun, 2 9mm pistols, and ammunition. A ledger with detailed notes made in Marilyn Buck's handwriting revealed the group's illicit activities. It listed dates and expenditures for rental cars, guns, ammunition, and illegal drugs. As investigators sifted through the evidence, they began to encounter a problem that would plague them throughout this complex case, according to Agent Lou Vesey.
I think the real difficulty is just the sheer bulk of information and evidence. Numerous pieces of evidence from numerous crime scenes, individuals who constantly used aliases, false identification, had safe houses. You had to figure out who was who. Was that person identical to a person with a different name but a same physical description in another safe house? It was a gigantic jigsaw puzzle, and sometimes you didn't think you had all the pieces.
Agents still didn't know who was involved, where they were, and why they did it.
Mr. Brown,
to get answers, the FBI needed to develop a cooperating witness. They turned to Sam Brown in Otisville Prison, the gunman arrested after the car chase. He was a low-level associate of the Black Liberation Army. Brown cooperated in the hopes that his sentence would be lightened.
Sam Brown was the only one who decided to talk to the investigators. He really got us started. He's the one that named a few names, and with those few names, that's where the investigation began widening out to the rest of them. So he was very important.
The most valuable name Brown provided was that of the mastermind behind the armed robbery, Mutulu Shakur. Shakur was a known militant, the leader of the Black Liberation Army, and one of the highest-ranking members of the gang who called themselves the Family.
In case you get stopped.
The Family was a group of about a dozen terrorists, comprised primarily of members of the Weather Underground and Black Liberation Army. Their formal association was news to Agent Maxwell.
We had known from prior investigations in the past that these groups had communicated, that they had some common goals and objectives. But never before had that communication or association evolved into this type of criminal activity.
All right, well, listen, Sam.
Brown told agents that the family met on many occasions to plan the Nyack robbery. Matulu Shakur assigned jobs to each member of the group.
You know what to do with that? Yes, sir.
Edward Joseph and Donald Weems were assigned as gunmen in the armored car assault. The FBI knew Weems was a member of the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Army. He had escaped from prison in 1978. Investigators knew little about Joseph. Another man named Chewy Ferguson would handle the M16 assault rifle. Samuel Lee Smith would be armed with a shotgun.
I don't want anybody to fire these weapons till Chewy says. Chewy's a weapon man, all right?
Brown didn't know the names of the others, but provided agents with physical descriptions. Agents put out APBs for the 5 names given, which included Samuel Lee Smith. In Queens, homicide detectives were on their way to Smith's last known address. A license plate registered to him had been found in a safe house. As one detective drove down Smith Street, he passed a driver who fit the suspect's description. The detective called for a marked unit to stop him. When the man saw the lights, he took off. Police followed him into an alley.
Get out of the car! Put your hands out the window! Use your left hand to open the door. Step out of the vehicle. Step out of the car. You step out of the car. Get out of the car. Step out of the car. Keep your hands back.
For the 3rd time in as many days, an armed member of the family had opened fire on uniformed officers. Samuel Lee Smith, the fugitive wanted for his role in the shooting deaths of 2 police officers and an armored car guard, had opened fire on New York City police. His attack did not last long. He was killed by the officers returning fire. Smith was the 5th member of a terrorist group called the Family to have been taken off the streets. 7 others remained at large, with almost $1 million in stolen cash still missing. On a tip from Sam Brown, a gang member already in custody, police canvassed a Bronx neighborhood for another suspect named Donald Weems. Special Agent Ken Maxwell recalls that Brown knew very little about Weems.
Brown had given us a general description of a neighborhood in the Bronx where he had met this individual who fit the description of Weems. My partner and I, after a process of elimination and a lot of legwork, pinpointed a building that possibly could be the place Brown was talking about.
Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, hoping someone would know Weems and reveal his address. They got lucky. A neighbor directed police to his apartment. He told them Weems was upstairs right now. Detectives called for backup. Since every other encounter with these terrorists had resulted in gunfire, they prepared for the worst. In a short time, they entered the building with a warrant and a SWAT team. They had no idea if Weems was alone or if he was armed.
There were some anxious moments in terms of waiting, but then he ultimately came out and surrendered in the hallway. In his apartment, however, we found several firearms, a gas mask, a bulletproof vest, and enough ammunition to do battle with a small army.
Weems was the only member of the family inside. He was tried on federal charges and found guilty of robbery and second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 75 years in prison. Though 6 members of the family were now in custody, group leader Matulu Shakur remained on the streets. Once again, cooperating informant Sam Brown provided agents with a lead. He believed Matulu Shakur could most likely be found in Harlem at the acupuncture clinic Shakur had founded. The FBI and NYPD set up 24-hour surveillance on the clinic.
We utilized agents and detectives of diverse ethnic backgrounds to do our best to blend into certain neighborhoods. We knew from both experience and also recognizing the intelligence and versatility of this group that we had to be particularly discreet in surveilling these individuals.
Agents watched and listened for months. Though Shakur never showed, they noted several others who came and went quite often. Agents hoped they would eventually lead them to Shakur. One night, agents followed a man from the clinic to a house at 85 Barrow Street in Greenwich Village. They learned the house was rented to Edward Joseph, one of the suspects named by informant Sam Brown in the Nyack robbery and shootout. They suspected Shakur was hiding there. They were right. Their months of perseverance had paid off. A federal judge authorized a Title III. This permitted agents to set up wiretaps and bugs. Shakur and Joseph must have suspected the FBI's presence, since they often turned up the TV when they talked. Despite this, agents were able to pick up snippets of incriminating conversations, including a discussion of killing informant Sam Brown. After several weeks, agents had enough evidence for a warrant to raid the Greenwich Village hideout. On the night of March 25, 1982, 6 months since the murders and robbery in Nyack, agents prepared for the assault. They'd strike early the next morning, hoping to catch the fugitives asleep and unaware. As the agents watched and waited, they saw Shakur enter the house. At dawn, 2 SWAT teams arrived. One team entered through the front door. The other covered the fire escape and back. They arrested 2 men, Chewy Ferguson and Edward Joseph, both named as participants in the Nyack heist. Their leader, Matulu Shakur, was nowhere to be found. Somehow, he'd escaped during the night, slipping past the surveillance. Ferguson and Joseph were convicted on federal charges as accessories for harboring a fugitive, though they were acquitted of murder charges stemming from the Nyack shootings. Both were sentenced to 12 years in prison. On July 23, 1982, almost a year after 2 officers and a guard had been killed in the Brinks robbery, Matulu Shakur was placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Finding the leader of the gang responsible for 3 cold-blooded murders would now become a priority for every FBI office across the country. Almost a year after a Brinks robbery and shootout with police, FBI agents around the country continued to pursue the mastermind behind the $1 million heist. Matulu Shakur a leader of the terrorist group called the Family, had been placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. Shakur and at least 3 others remained at large. In the summer of 1982, an agent from New York City traveled to Georgia to interview a member of the Family who had been arrested for a separate bank robbery. Tyrone Risen offered his cooperation in the hopes of a lighter sentence by the state of Georgia. Though he claimed that he was not present when the armored car was robbed in Nyack, New York, he confessed to having helped plan the job that left a Brinks guard and 2 police officers dead. Risen provided crucial information about other members of the Family.
Risen was not only a member of the Family, he was a very important member of the Family and had been involved in all the robberies. He knew who was in the Family, he knew the names, and he knew how the Family operated. So he was able to describe the MO, the robberies they did, the weapons they used, who did what.
Our lookouts, more or less.
Risen told the agent how members of the group were able to secure so many aliases. The prisoner explained that a manager of a children's clothing store in Manhattan was key to obtaining false IDs. The manager gathered license information each time a customer paid by check. Since New York State did not require a photo license in the early 80s, an imposter would take the information to the Motor Vehicles Department, claiming she'd lost her license. Then, the DMV would issue a duplicate immediately. Risen also described to Special Agent Maxwell the group's motives.
They termed these robberies expropriations, almost acts of war. And as one of their members eloquently, or not so eloquently, commented one time, in war, people get hurt. So if you can understand that philosophy, you can understand the mindset or the motivation behind the gang.
Risen's information helped agents understand more about the inner workings of the group. But by the fall of 1984, 3 years after the Brinks heist and triple murder, 3 fugitives still eluded the FBI, including gang leader Mutulu Shakur, Marilyn Buck, and Susan Rosenberg. Despite this, time was on the side of the FBI. The longer the fugitives ran, the more likely it was they'd make a mistake. On November 29, 1984, local police received a call from a manager at a storage facility in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. He reported a customer on the premises who had been paying her bill with a credit card that was determined to be stolen.
Hello, this is Bob from Cherry Hill Storage.
Officers arrived to find the woman about to leave. Inside the back of the van, they noticed containers that appeared to hold explosives. Police asked her for ID. When she reached for her purse under the driver's seat, the cautious officers stopped her. They wanted her hands to stay in plain sight. Inside her purse, they found a weapon. They placed her under arrest. When she was processed, police learned that she was Susan Rosenberg, a member of the Family, wanted in connection with the Brinks robbery and shootout. Investigators secured a search warrant for the van. Inside the crates, they found 640 pounds of explosives and 14 weapons. The van was registered in New York State to a woman named Louise Harmon. Agents discovered the name and her address had been falsified. As forensic technicians processed Rosenberg's vehicle, they noticed a sticker on the door from a repair shop in Connecticut. Agents located the New Haven repair shop where the vehicle had been serviced. They hoped the owner would remember the persons who had brought the van in. They showed the owner several photographs of women who were known associates of the family. The woman he identified was Marilyn Jean Buck, one of 2 remaining fugitives in the Brinks robbery and shootout. While Buck had not used her real name on the vehicle's paperwork, she listed an address in Dobbs Ferry, New York on the repair bill. Agents followed up on the lead. They determined that Buck was in Dobbs Ferry and set up surveillance, but she eluded them for months. Then on May 11th, 1985, they finally cornered her outside a diner and arrested her. Buck denied knowing Mutulu Shakur or having any connection to the Brinks robbery and shootout 4 years before.
Have a weapon up against the car.
But a federal trial would prove differently. Buck was sentenced to 50 years in prison without the possibility of parole.
She was extremely important in the planning of the robberies and in the procurement of the weapons, as it turns out. A lot of the weapons that the family had, she obtained in gun shows in Texas, buying them under phony names.
Now, only one known suspect in the Nyack robbery and shootout remained: terrorist leader Mutulu Shakur.
Do you happen to see anybody with him?
Agents searched a Baltimore apartment rented by Buck, hoping for a lead to Shakur's whereabouts. They discovered paraphernalia for making false identity papers, wigs likely used in disguises, plans to bomb federal offices, and $10,000 in cash. Searchers also found guns and ammunition stashed in various locations throughout the apartment.
Looks like another handgun.
Then, scrawled on a piece of paper, agents came across what they'd been hoping for: evidence of Mutulu Shakur's whereabouts. It listed a phone number in Los Angeles. Special Agent David Mitchell spearheaded the search for Shakur. He contacted the FBI Los Angeles field office to have agents follow up the lead.
Special Agent Dana Ingalls in the Los Angeles office advised me that he had interviewed an individual that had established that Shakur had in fact been residing in Los Angeles.
Shakur had eluded authorities in a nationwide manhunt for over 5 years. Agents hoped that this time they could corner him and bring down the leader of the terrorist gang responsible for killing 1 armored car guard and 2 police officers. The FBI and NYPD were closing in on Mutulu Shakur, the elusive criminal believed to have masterminded a deadly Brinks robbery and shootout. Special Agent David Mitchell had tracked Shakur to LA, where the terrorist leader remained 1 step ahead.
There were a number of challenges. Shakur was working with a group of individuals that were closely aligned to each other. They had a support network. The investigators all assigned to this investigation were having a difficult time getting individuals to cooperate.
After many weeks, investigators were finally able to convince an informant to tell what he knew about the fugitive's whereabouts. He said he didn't know where Shakur was hiding, but he identified a man by the name of Chapman, known to be close to Shakur. For about 6 weeks, agents conducted ground and air surveillance on Chapman and other Shakur associates, but Shakur continued to elude authorities.
Shakur was leading a very low-profile life in Los Angeles, at least as far as our investigation could determine. He did not frequent any locations or areas where he could be identified, and we virtually knew very little about his activity at that time.
As the surveillance continued, Mitchell and the other investigators tried to find a pattern to the moves Shakur's associates made to hide him around the city. They pored over apartment rental records and other documents, but learned little. Then on February 11th, 1986, their confidential informant called.
Hey, thanks for the tip.
He told them that Chapman would meet with Shakur that night after Chapman left a Lakers basketball game. Investigators located his car and waited for him to leave the forum. Chapman attempted what agents call dry cleaning, counter-surveillance tactics designed to lose a tail. He wove through the streets, turning and changing direction. Police stayed with him, not knowing if Chapman had seen them. When Chapman reached his destination, Mitchell's team pulled in nearby. Chapman approached a man they believed was Shakur. Two officers headed to where the men were talking, careful not to attract attention. When Shakur saw them, he took off on foot. They caught up with him in an alley. The arrest of this violent revolutionary closed a 5-year nationwide manhunt.
When Shakur was arrested, it was apparent to those officers and agents involved in the arrest that he was tired, and it was late in the evening. He was transported to the Los Angeles FBI office, where Agent Ingles and I attempted to interview him. Shakur declined to furnish any statement to us during this interview and was subsequently removed back to New York City to face the charges.
In the spring of 1986, Shakur was tried on federal charges related to the Brinks robbery and shootout. He was sentenced to 60 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The police officers who survived that terrifying day in Nyack, New York, were relieved that Shakur had been brought to justice. But for South Nyack Police Chief Alan Colsey, the memory of their loss would always be with them.
Eddie O'Grady and Officer Brown, Chip Brown as we called him, we're local Nyack community members. They'd gone through the Nyack school district. They had been on the job before I was, and in fact, more or less had sort of brought me and broken me into the community. They were very, very close to the community and to a lot of us that were police officers here. They were excellent people. They were excellent cops, and we miss them dearly to this day.
To commemorate the slain officers, a monument was erected in Nyack, New York. The surviving colleagues have found some comfort in knowing that the lessons learned from the Nyack shootout have made life safer for citizens, as well as for the officers on the street today.
Let it not be said that they died in vain, but rather that their ultimate sacrifice led to the identification of a national problem. I think their ultimate sacrifice and the tragic deaths of everyone involved certainly uncovered a nationwide network of domestic terrorists heretofore unknown, and in essence prevented the loss of life to others.
Two thieves develop a terrifying pattern, combining bank robberies with home invasions and taking families of bank executives hostage. For years, federal agents track them, always one step behind. Even when they're caught, the robbers do not quit. An ingenious escape sends the fugitives on another crime spree, with the FBI once again on their trail.
Too often, convicted felons learn new techniques and find new partners in prison. In 1982, a group of former inmates began a spree of kidnapping and robbery. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. For years, the suspects used false names and a network of criminal contacts to elude capture. To find them, the FBI had to pierce their tight-knit circle and find new partners of their own.
On December 28, 1982, Oklahoma City Bank Vice President Steve Thompson and his wife Ellen arrived home from a holiday party. Unexpectedly, a car pulled in behind them.
When they got out of the car and started entering our garage, they hollered, "Mr. Thompson, we're federal agents." They were on top of us, with just in a few seconds.
Ellen Thompson thought perhaps the men had the wrong house.
I couldn't think of any reason federal agents would be coming to our house, and I've heard of mistakes before, so I looked at him and said, "There must be some mistake here. Can I see your identification?" And he pulls out a gun.
The one with the obvious wig seemed to be the enforcer. The other one was in charge.
There was obviously one other male involved because somebody drove him to our house and that car left and we never saw that car again.
The two gunmen forced the couple inside. The leader began interrogating Thompson about the bank where he worked.
No.
He cooperated so the incident could end without anyone getting hurt. Thompson answered some questions about the bank's complex security system, but he knew the safety of his employees came first.
I didn't give him names of actual people that had combinations and stuff. I said, we'll just have to wait and see who gets there and who has the combinations and stuff, because I didn't want to put any individuals in jeopardy.
I see.
Hello.
A man called to speak with the gunman.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It sounded like they were finalizing plans for a robbery the next day.
Well, call me back at 6:30.
The leader warned Thompson to follow his orders exactly.
Okay.
He was trying to make a point with me, and he said, if anybody sets off the alarms tomorrow, if anything goes wrong and the police come, he said, I'm going to kill the police.
Tell me.
He made the comment at that point. He said, I'm not going back to the penitentiary.
The gunman held the couple hostage overnight. An hour before dawn, they forced the Thompsons to drive them to the bank.
Woman?
At 9 a.m., they waited for employees to arrive.
She's wearing a black dress, floral print.
They had someone stationed outside as a lookout.
She's coming in the front door.
During the robbery, one person was in contact with somebody by phone the whole time. And they were able to give him detail as far as how many people were coming to the front door.
The gunman knew only certain employees had access to the multi-layered security system.
We had armed visitors this morning, but if everybody cooperates, we'll be okay.
Ma'am, I need to know, do you have the combination to the safe?
No.
I need you to come with me.
Those without codes or combinations were shoved into a bathroom holding area.
What's going on?
Blonde, tall, act natural, everything will be fine.
It always takes, more than one person to access anything. You have different layers of security within the vault and the cash vaults themselves within the vaults.
Sir, I need to know, do you have the combination to the safe?
It's okay.
Yes, I do. I need you to come with me.
Anyone with a code was put to work.
So that's what he was trying to determine, was who was going to be able to access that cash.
Other employees had gotten them close. One final combination stood between the robbers and hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Get it open. Don't play hero. That'd be stupid.
The robber with the wig was the more threatening one.
Do what you're told, no one gets hurt. Good, now get in there and fill them up.
Within 30 minutes, the gunman had hundreds of thousands of dollars in hand.
Did you get it?
Got it.
Come on. I need your keys.
They herded Mr. Thompson and the manager in with the other hostages.
He put me in one of the restrooms, and he told me and the people in our restroom that said, we're going to be here 5 more minutes. Nobody stick their head out. And they left. And I was pretty sure that, from hearing the conversations out there, that they were going to leave right away.
No, wait.
So I probably waited, probably a minute and a half before I came out.
When it appeared the robbers had gone, Thompson directed the manager to contact authorities.
Go ahead and call the police.
Yes, Quail Creek Bank's just been robbed. We need the police here right away.
The call went out to nearby Oklahoma City patrol units.
Respond immediately to bank robbery at 1482 Olson Road.
10-4.
Following standard procedure, Oklahoma City police also contacted the FBI. Special Agent Mike Seigel took the call.
I shouted to other agents on the squad that we had a bank robbery. I gave them the location and gave them a little bit of information about what was going on, the fact that the robbers were gone, and we had a bunch of agents in head for the bank.
The patrol units arrived first. They approached quietly and cleared the bank, making sure no gunmen were still inside. FBI agents arrived minutes later. The Hobbs Act, enacted in 1946 to protect federally insured depositors, makes bank robberies the jurisdiction of the FBI. It meant a nationwide police force would investigate the crime and go after the robbers. The Thompsons described the ordeal that began in their home the night before.
So no one was hurt.
Didn't have anybody hurt.
It had been a sophisticated, well-planned crime, with no evidence left behind. These robbers must have struck before. But no similar robberies had occurred in the area in the past. Agents searched the FBI's database to see if any had been committed elsewhere. They found a national file of robbery cases that included invasions of bank employees' homes.
So I pulled that file out and found that there were several offices that had robberies where the pattern was very similar. So I started communicating with those offices.
He hoped to find an agent who had experience with whoever robbed the Oklahoma City bank, and located Special Agent Steve Chenoweth at the Phoenix FBI.
Hey, listen.
Seigel described the Oklahoma City home invasion-style bank robbery. the robbers' disguises and their mannerisms.
How many guys?
Chenoweth immediately named 2 bank robbers he knew, Terry Connor and Joseph Dougherty, as having operated that way.
All those things are typical of what they had done in the past. And so a lot of that, once I learned the actual details of what had occurred in Oklahoma City, just pointed a finger right at those 2.
Witness descriptions from Oklahoma City matched the felons. Because of his knowledge of the pair, Chenoweth became the lead case agent. He knew that Connor and Dougherty had met in federal prison. Terry Connor was the leader, in for 3 Arizona bank robberies. Each time, he and his partner had held bank employees hostage overnight.
Joe Dougherty was just a thug from Philadelphia, and was a stick-up guy, one-on-one, gun in the right hand, maybe a note in the other hand, and give me what you got across the counter. Not a very sophisticated MO at all, and certainly didn't have the smarts that Terry Connor had.
Connor was a smooth talker, recruiting accomplices with ease.
Terry was, primarily a West Coast guy, and Terry, being from the West Coast and being from California, we did certainly concentrate our efforts out there in California looking for him.
Agents contacted the Monterey, California FBI resident agency. They told Special Agent Harlan Freimeyer what they knew about Terry Connor.
Oklahoma City went on to tell us that the suspicion was that he had a girlfriend that lived in Pacific Grove, California, and they wondered if he might not be heading that direction and asked us to do some work to see if we could work that angle.
They located Connor's girlfriend's home. Routine surveillance revealed a possible link to Terry Connor, who was last believed to be in Oklahoma City.
While doing a spot check on this residence, lo and behold, there was a vehicle parked out front with Oklahoma license plates on it. So I notified the Oklahoma City office, and they didn't actually have a record of that vehicle that they could positively tie into Terry Connor at the time, but they thought it might have been one that he purchased under an alias.
I'll tell you what, you ever seen...
While the girlfriend was away from the house, agents spoke with her gardener. Identifying themselves, they told him they were conducting a federal investigation. He needed to be truthful and discreet. They asked if he had recently seen any men at the residence. He hadn't, but recalled overhearing the girlfriend talking about meeting Connor the following week.
The information I got was specific enough that we knew that on a given day, Terry Connor was going to meet somewhere with his girlfriend, and so I felt at that point in time that we were very close to Terry Connor.
Agents followed Connor's girlfriend for days, learning that she drove several different cars. They placed tracking devices on each of them. With receivers in FBI cars and airplanes, they tracked her whenever she drove. But on the day she was to meet Connor, the signal faded.
Once we lost the vehicle, we were spreading our vehicles out in all sorts of directions trying to locate the signal. And we had an airplane assisting us that day, and the airplane gave us the signal out on the highway, and we picked her up again.
Agents traveled toward the location of the recaptured signal. When they spotted the car, it was parked in front of a restaurant.
There was no sign of the girlfriend or Terry Connor or anybody else that was associated with the car, so we made a plan right then to establish full-time coverage on the car until something happened.
Roger that. Stand down. All right, guys, we're still in stand-down mode. Stand down.
A SWAT team waited, watching for any sign of the suspect. An FBI agent made sure that if the couple returned for the car, they couldn't drive it away.
We let the air out of her tires so they wouldn't sneak in and sneak out real fast, and waited.
Most stakeouts mean long hours with no payoff. But the agents had to stick with it and hope that suspected bank robber Terry Connor would surface. After a hostage-taking and bank robbery in Oklahoma City, the FBI developed two suspects, Terry Connor and Joseph Dougherty. 2 months later, and 1,500 miles away in Atascadero, California, agents staked out a restaurant where Connor's girlfriend had left a car. They believed Connor was in the area, planning to meet her. The long hours of the stakeout paid off for FBI Special Agent Harlan Freimeyer.
We just happened to see Terry Connor drive into the parking lot with his girlfriend, and it doesn't usually work this way, but the photographs we had of Terry Connor were of such quality that it was easy to make instant recognition, so we knew that we were about to accomplish our mission.
Let's go.
The suspect was known to carry weapons, so a tactical arrest team took the lead.
FBI!
They struck fast, giving Terry Connor no opportunity to flee. The girlfriend was questioned, then released after investigators determined she was not involved in Connor's crimes.
Give me your left hand.
Agents then discovered an unexpected benefit to deflating the tire of the girlfriend's car.
By the time we got to the point where we were making our arrest, he had already popped the trunk on his car. And of course, without a search warrant, we couldn't have gotten in there if he hadn't popped it for us. And so once the arrest was made, there we had in plain view the contents of his trunk, and that was useful to us because there was a briefcase that we opened and found a substantial amount of money.
Nearly $40,000 in cash bore serial numbers matching some of the money stolen during the Oklahoma City robbery. Agents also found a large diamond and a jeweler's receipt for 6 more. Authorities took Connor to the Monterey FBI office, where they charged him with the Oklahoma City robbery. In handing over his personal effects during the intake process, something of interest emerged. A sales receipt from a Reno, Nevada car dealership. The buyer was listed as Russell Anderson, perhaps an unknown alias of Connor or Dougherty. He had given an address in Santa Maria, California.
My instinctive belief was that that address might well be the address of his partner Dougherty. So we put out the word as fast as we could to our counterparts in Southern California, asked them to get out and check that address.
A SWAT team immediately went to the residence and prepared to make entry. They suspected Dougherty was inside, perhaps armed. The flashbang grenade was designed to stun anyone in the house.
By the time they got there, whoever had been occupying that address was gone. I fear that possibly they were alerted by Terry Connor in the book-in process when he was given his phone call.
Word that Connor was arrested, but that Doherty was not, went out to case agent Steve Chenoweth.
Even though we're looking for two, we're certainly willing to take one. And the fact that we didn't find Joe there was a little disappointing, but also the fact that we did find Terry Connor meant that we had solved half of that equation, and we just had to up the ante to find Joe.
Chenoweth knew Joe Doherty would keep robbing banks using the method taught him by Connor. But without Terry Connor controlling him, Doherty was a loose cannon, now more dangerous than ever.
Terry was the brains. Terry was the guy that made most of the decisions. And now you're putting Joe, who is more prone to violence than Terry was, basically in a leadership role. If he should fly off the handle, there might not be anybody there to calm him down.
For 8 months, there was no sign of Doherty anywhere. Then, in Phoenix, on the night before the busiest shopping day of the year, when banks are stocked up with cash, the vice president of a large area bank returned home with his family from a Thanksgiving dinner with relatives.
What happened?
It appeared their home had been burglarized. But the intruders hadn't left. Through the night, the two robbers held the banker and his family hostage.
We just want to rob the bank. Just calm down.
It looked like Joe Doherty was leading a new partner.
Take it easy.
And now that he was in charge,
Do you understand?
anything could happen.
Settle in and be friends.
Thanksgiving, 1983.
Ride to the bank. They're told no one gets hurt. Give me the keys.
Two intruders held a Phoenix banker and his family hostage overnight.
Go start the car.
Hours before dawn, Joe Doherty and his new partner were ready to rob the bank. They would use the banker's car for transportation and his children for collateral.
Okay, slow down. Get in the car. Go. We are now. Come on, get in the car.
Doherty never put down his weapon.
Remember, I've got the gun on your wife. Get in the car.
In less than 2 hours, they would drive to the bank, empty its vault, and escape with $270,000 cash, leaving the family frightened but unharmed.
What's the address?
The heist was in the home city of the lead case agent on Doherty's trail.
Okay, put it out to all
When
agents.
Steve Chenoweth learned of the crime, he believed he knew who had done it.
Thanks. My first thought right away is Joe Doherty, but didn't know the answer to that until I started talking to the victims to get an actual physical description.
Wondering if Doherty was taunting him by striking in his own town, Chenoweth headed to the banker's home to learn more details of a fearful night spent held at gunpoint.
Most of us don't go through that, and to go through it for an entire evening with your two children is a very scary thing. And so they were glad it was over, and they were certainly glad to see us come.
Jack, can you tell me just a little bit more about...
The banker described the assailants, saying both wore obvious wigs, and the bigger one was in charge.
Once I got the information, the physical description of the leader fit that of Joe Doherty right to a T. So I knew that we were dealing with Joe, but here again, we had another individual that he had picked up, and we didn't know who that guy was as his partner.
It's normally there.
The family described how the pair had acted. Doherty and his new partner were more volatile and threatening than he and Connor had been.
There's two people, two.
But as before, they left agents with no leads.
One bigger guy that...
6 months later, and 900 miles to the northwest in Reno, Nevada, local police called the FBI to another robbed bank. Once again, the heist was preceded by a hostage-taking the night before. But this time, the level of violence had increased. Now, there was a bomb.
They'd strapped it around the bank officer, indicating that it was explosives. And if he didn't do what he was told to do, that they would detonate that. And that certainly is enough to put the fear of God into you. And I would certainly do anything that they asked me to do.
I want to stay with him. I'm right outside, Bob.
Determining there were no booby traps, a Reno police bomb specialist freed the terrified bank officer and sent him out of the vault to safety. The expert cut off the power supply, though he later determined the device was a fake. The bank officer told the FBI that he and his family had been held hostage at gunpoint overnight by two men wearing wigs and business suits.
Recognize the gentleman in this picture right here? That's him.
Shown a photo of Joseph Dougherty, he said it looked like one of the men.
That's what we needed to hear, because that's who we're going after.
Witnesses had seen a white sedan with Washington state plates speeding away from the bank after the robbery, so agents searched the area. They found the vehicle abandoned less than 200 yards from the Reno FBI office. It seemed Dougherty was again boldly challenging the FBI. A check of the plates showed it was registered to a man in Spokane, Washington. That man said he had recently sold the car to someone who fit the description of Dougherty and a pregnant woman whom the FBI believed to be Dougherty's girlfriend. To help find the couple, the FBI called on the U.S. Marshals, experts in interstate tracking of cars and people. United States Marshal Denny Barrand believed the cars Dougherty used would be the key to finding him.
As fugitives, Joseph Dougherty was very smart. He changed cars like some people change socks. He would buy cars, sell them back to the original owners, sell them to a used car lot.
Marshals painstakingly followed a complex trail of cars and aliases, and eventually got a break. They discovered a car accident report linking one of Dougherty's aliases to an address in Idaho.
Hi there.
Since the house appeared to be abandoned, the marshals interviewed neighbors.
Yeah, this
One woman immediately recognized the robber, though she only knew him by his alias. She said he had the peculiar habit of shooting pistols in his backyard.
baby. And about a week ago, though, they packed up and moved away.
She told the marshals that he, his girlfriend, and their newborn child had recently moved out.
Okay, go ahead.
Securing a subpoena for moving truck rental records in the area, marshals determined Dougherty's girlfriend had rented one under a false name and had driven it to Colorado.
I'll check on that before it leaves. Good.
The rental company gave authorities her destination, a house in the mountains outside Denver. FBI agents and U.S. Marshals watched from the cover of the woods surrounding the house. Because there was now a baby involved, they had to be especially cautious. At one point, they observed the girlfriend leaving the house with another man. It wasn't Dougherty. Marshals could not see if they had the infant with them. Other marshals followed the two into town and watched them enter a store without the baby.
I said, go to the car is parked in the shopping mall parking lot and look inside and see if they left the baby inside the car.
It's a negative on the kid in the car. We're going to go check out.
And they radioed back to me, no, the baby's not in the car. And they didn't have the baby in arms. That means one thing, the baby's still at the house.
Still at the house with Joseph Dougherty. After 2 years of constantly being minutes too late, authorities believed they were finally going to arrest the dangerous robber. But in law enforcement, things rarely happen exactly as planned. 2 years after Terry Connor and Joseph Dougherty robbed an Oklahoma City bank, Connor had been captured, convicted of armed bank robbery, and sentenced to 25 years. The FBI believed his partner, Joseph Dougherty, had continued a spree of hostage-taking and bank robbery, but that they finally had him cornered in a Colorado house. Earlier that day, they had arrested the fugitive's girlfriend and a male associate. The girlfriend confirmed that Dougherty and their infant child were still inside the house, and that Dougherty was armed.
Okay, y'all got that? There's a small child in there? Yes, sir. Okay, do not fire except from his order. Got it. You ready? Right. Set up the front.
A SWAT team fanned out in stations around the house.
Setting up now. Copy number 2. Number 3, are you in position?
Same thing, just moving around. Go.
Also watching was U.S. Marshal Denny Barron.
Joseph Dougherty stepped out of the house, positively identified, and with that he took a .357 Magnum and started to fire into the woods.
But it didn't look like Dougherty was firing at the agents. The SWAT team had to keep cool.
Guys, hunker down. If you're not in danger, don't return fire. Don't return fire unless you're being threatened.
The marshals recalled the neighbor in Idaho who had said Dougherty often fired random shots in his backyard. They believed he didn't know they were there.
Okay, just hold your fire, and let me know if he comes back out again. We're going to try him on the phone.
They still needed to resolve the situation peacefully. An FBI negotiator placed a call to the house.
Hello? This is the FBI. We have you surrounded.
The negotiator, he said, I established contact, but the person is hung up. It was answered by a male, but he hung up.
Got it.
The well-trained snipers had several possible shots at the fugitive, but they held off.
We had to consider, of course, the safety of the baby. We had to consider the safety of other people that might be in the home that we didn't know about.
They've seen him go past the window several times.
They see the baby.
Has anybody caught sight of the child? Anybody seen the child?
Still, they had to be ready if Dougherty started firing at them.
Again, try to get him on the phone. Stand by, be ready.
The negotiator called the house again.
To get her to come out of the house.
He told the fugitive that his girlfriend and accomplice had already been arrested.
Come out of the house.
And asked Dougherty to consider his child's safety and surrender peacefully.
He hung up.
All right, guys, he hung up. Let's move in. Move to the front now.
Through the window, they saw him approaching the door.
Please! Put your hands in your hands now! Put your hands in your hands! Turn around! Back up on my command! Back up now! Back up! Come on! Hands up! Come on! On the ground! Now! All the way, flat down. Arms out. All the way down. Copy.
He was arrested without a struggle.
Once we had the baby out of the house, we had the house secured, then we began to move through it, and we discovered 16 firearms in that house, including a .308 tactical assault rifle, 2 of those, all hidden, all loaded, all charged and ready to go to defend that house.
Dougherty was charged and held for trial in Oklahoma. Almost a year and a half later, on June 19, 1985, 2 U.S. Marshals were transporting Terry Conner and Joseph Dougherty to an Oklahoma City courthouse.
I guess, sure.
Dougherty was facing the first of 4 trials, this one for the bank robbery and hostage-taking in Oklahoma City 3 years earlier. He had subpoenaed his partner, Terry Conner, as a witness. On a rural road, they made their move. With smuggled jailhouse contraband, a handcuff key, and a razor blade. They had never planned on arriving at the courthouse. They took the marshal's guns
Pull over.
and ordered them off the road.
Yeah. Move. Okay.
They marched the lawman into the woods. The felons were desperate for freedom, and it seemed no one could stop them from gaining it. June 19th, 1985. Bank robbers Terry Conner and Joseph Dougherty escaped the custody of 2 U.S. Marshals while in transit to Dougherty's trial. The fugitives handcuffed the Marshals to a tree and stole their weapons, badges, and car. They were mobile, armed, and for now, no one knew they were back on the run. They had a 15-minute head start before the Marshals managed to free themselves and report the escape. At the U.S. courthouse in Oklahoma City, Special Agent Steve Chenoweth was shocked when he heard the news.
My initial thought was, this can't happen. When you put so much time and effort into a case like this over a period of years, and to have it just kind of disappear in a flash, in a moment's notice, it's a real severe letdown.
Bank surveillance videos captured Conner and Dougherty's next crimes. 2 small-scale bank robberies in St. Louis. Agents believed they'd needed some quick cash before getting back to their regular routine.
Initially, after the escape and after the fact that they had held up both banks there in St. Louis and had about $30,000 cash, we knew that they were going to be coming back out and striking again at a bank officer and his family. We knew that there was a high potential for kidnapping. We knew that the propensity for violence was great.
2 months later, police in West Allis, Wisconsin, received a bank robbery call.
This is Sherry. How may I help you? You're at what bank? And the address, please?
$500,000 was taken, the largest bank heist in the state's history.
Station to Squad 113. You're responding to a bank robbery, 10707 West National Avenue.
It was by now an all too familiar pattern. 2 gunmen had held the bank president and his wife hostage, then, again aided by a lookout, robbed the bank. Fingerprints placed Connor and Doherty at the scene. Local police called the Wisconsin FBI. Special Agent Dan Kraft was assigned the case. Reading witness statements, he saw that the fugitives were bolder than ever, no longer even using disguises.
They did nothing to conceal their identity. They didn't do anything to really help by saying their names, but Terry Connor did mention to the bank president's wife, he said, the FBI is going to know who we are.
Because of the continuing danger Connor and Doherty posed, both were placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. Media coverage drew many leads.
Use your help on it.
One call led agents to a man who might have been the robber's lookout outside the Wisconsin bank. Agents issued an APB for the alleged lookout's car. Days later, a state trooper pulled him over and called the FBI.
What got going on here?
Once they identified him, they took him in.
There was an active open warrant for him out of St. Louis for violating his federal parole. So we arrested him, and I brought him downtown to the FBI office.
At first, the man refused to answer questions about Connor and Doherty.
So we would talk. And this went on for 5 days. But it wasn't a sweating. I mean, you see on television where it looks like an interrogation and you're getting in somebody's face. No, it was just 2 men talking.
Finally, Kraft won him over.
Thinking about it. Yeah.
But he was afraid of facing Connor and Doherty in court.
Let's just talk about it, you know, and it's,
I'd like to cooperate, he says, but, you know, I won't testify. So you don't have to testify. We don't need your testimony. You know, we've got these guys locked in. I just need to know how they think. I need to know what they do and how they do it so I can get one step ahead of them.
Understand what they're doing.
The suspect agreed to talk in the hopes of a reduced sentence. He told Kraft how Connor and Doherty chose the banks they robbed, how they traveled, even how they communicated through hotel front desks.
One of them would call up and make a reservation in the name of a former prison warden. And the other one would call up and ask if this person had checked in yet. And the switchboard operator would then say, no, Mr. So-and-so hadn't checked in yet. And they'd say, well, can I leave a message for him? So then the other one would then call back looking for messages. And they did this as one of their ways of communicating without ever it being traced.
The most important piece of information he gave was the name of another man who had helped Connor and Doherty rob banks in the past. His name was John Harris. Agents found Harris in Tucson, Arizona. Surveilling him, they saw him making and receiving calls at a certain payphone. Getting a warrant, they tapped the phone and listened in. He was talking to Connor and Doherty.
We hope through a series of wiretaps that we might be able to trace the phone back to a particular area, and through investigation in that area, maybe locate them.
Agents learned the fugitives were calling from Chicago and were planning another robbery there. Special Agent George Spinelli of the FBI Chicago field office distributed photos of the fugitives to area hotels. One reported a guest who looked like Joseph Doherty, though that name wasn't on the register.
As I looked at the register, I looked down and I did see an alias that Connor had used in the past. At that point, I thought possibly we had 2 top 10 fugitives at this hotel.
Case agent Steve Chenoweth immediately flew to Chicago, joining the other agents at the hotel. The guest who looked like Doherty appeared to have checked out.
How about a vehicle?
No vehicles yet either.
Agents watched the room Connor might be in. If he was there, they needed to confront him outside his room to avoid a standoff.
We were very concerned that it could get violent, and especially Connor, who had vowed that he would never be taken alive. We took extra precautions at that point.
An arrest team planned the takedown for the parking lot.
Okay. All right, keep an eye. Okay, sounds good.
Eventually, the FBI agent spotted someone leaving the room.
I think I might have something here. Come here, take a look. Yeah, got some activity. Can't see his face yet.
It was
That's
Connor.
him, George. That's Connor.
He was
That's a
alone.
positive ID.
Tony, it's our guy. Take him. Take him now.
Agents called for the SWAT team to make the arrest.
So he did not have an opportunity to get away. He was grabbed immediately.
Although Joe Doherty was not seen by agents, it appeared he was nearby and saw the police activity.
A call came in to the switchboard asking what was going on. And it was a male, and asking about the occupant maybe of a particular room. And no doubt in my mind it was Doherty, and he was trying to find out what happened.
Agents searched the area, but did not find Doherty. The one thing they knew was that he would commit more robberies with a new partner.
This guy doesn't have any other choice. He can't do a robbery by himself. He's got to reach out for somebody else.
The FBI believed he'd call on John Harris, and learned Harris had recently flown to San Francisco. Again, they spotted Harris repeatedly using a certain payphone. They ordered another phone tap.
About a week later, we get a phone call, and it was Joe Doherty.
Doherty said he was calling from St. Louis. But FBI technicians couldn't trace the call out of San Francisco.
And all of a sudden, the stark realization came to us that this guy's not in St. Louis. Doherty is right there in that area.
Agents realized he himself was surveilling his lookout to see if he had been followed.
So what's the plan?
Yeah, we'll try and meet you there.
They hoped he hadn't seen the undercover agents.
All right, later.
Believing his lookout was in the clear, Doherty planned a meeting for the next morning, there in San Francisco. Agents showed up early. Doherty arrived as promised.
And at about that time, we had a whole lot of very weary FBI agents pounce on Joseph William Doherty. And so ends the saga, and so ended the chase.
After a nationwide manhunt that lasted more than a year, Terry Connor and Joseph Doherty were tried for their most recent crimes. They each received 2 life sentences, plus 139 years without parole. They are kept in separate federal prisons. Their partnership forever terminated. His trademark is gunfire. His goal, grab the cash, no matter who gets in the way. In his wake, he leaves terrified victims, fleeting glimpses, and few clues for the FBI agents on his trail. But they are determined to find him and end this gunman's reign of terror.
In the late 1980s, the FBI matched wits with a cunning bank robber, a lone gunman responsible for the longest string of unsolved bank robberies in FBI history. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The robber's planning was meticulous. He executed his crimes with military precision. It would take the combined skills of local police and dozens of agents to catch a criminal mastermind they called the Shootist.
San Diego, California. On November 5th, 1987, the late morning quiet shatters with a gun blast in a local bank. A gunman orders customers to the ground, threatening to shoot whoever disobeys. The robber forces the teller to fill his bag with money from all the cash drawers, warning against alarms, die packs, or marked bills. He avoids the vault, which would take more time. This robber hits hard and gets out fast. Employees call police immediately.
Yes, hello?
But even in the best-case scenario, it takes several seconds to get through to an operator. And several minutes for dispatched units to arrive. By then, the gunman is long gone. Authorities conduct a full crime scene investigation. Although the man wore no gloves, he was careful enough not to touch any surface and left behind no fingerprints. Bank robbery is a federal crime. The case goes to the FBI. Bank robbery coordinator Special Agent Jack Kelly considers this gunman a top priority. He's a takeover robber, taking command of the entire bank rather than slipping a teller a note. It's a rare style, used in less than 5% of bank robberies.
Even on the takeover style robbers, most of them didn't fire weapons in the bank. So he was, again, even a smaller percentage of the small percentage of takeover robbers that we had at the time. So from that aspect, he was considered to be much more aggressive and much more dangerous.
Also, he doesn't use a partner inside the bank, as most takeover robbers do. His violence has a profound effect on his victims.
Victims in a takeover-style robbery are pretty traumatized by the event, especially when there's shots fired in the bank, and consequently your descriptions can vary dramatically. I mean, as far as the age, the height, the weight, everything.
Some victims say he was wearing a disguise. Others disagree. The differing descriptions are of no real help, so agents turn to the bank's security camera photos.
We did have some surveillance pictures of mediocre quality at that time, and it was not a great deal of assistance to us in trying to identify who this individual might have been.
The photos show only that the robber is a white male about 6 feet tall with a beard and mustache. Agents face a serious challenge. No evidence left behind. No reliable description of the robber. Special Agent Kelly believes it's not the man's first time robbing a bank. Reviewing unsolved cases for similarities, Kelly suspects the same man robbed another San Diego bank a year earlier.
The modus operandi was identical, with someone coming in the bank, firing the gun in the ceiling, vaulting the counter. Similar description.
The gunman left no evidence behind.
The fact that there were so few clues was an indication that this guy was pretty good, and he really probably planned these robberies very well.
Soon agents learn the gunman is not finished in the area.
After he robbed the second time in San Diego, he actually came back a month later and robbed a third time in San Diego using the identical MO and firing the shots into the ceiling.
The robber's choice to fire his weapon makes him a deadly threat.
I don't think a robber that does something like this would hesitate to shoot somebody if somebody actually tried to stop him.
California? As a rule, Special Agent Kelly attaches code names to serial bank robbers to allow for shorthand communication among agents. Also, a catchy nickname increases publicity.
The media would be more willing to pick up the story and to show pictures in the newspaper or on television, which would hopefully help us generate some leads.
Kelly dubs this one the shootist for his distinctive and dangerous MO. On December 14th, 1987, the shootist robs a fourth California bank in Mission Viejo, 70 miles north of San Diego.
Check inside the bank. I'm gonna go see what's in the convenience store here, see what we can find. Okay.
It was my responsibility to review all the robberies that would come in from the surrounding regional FBI offices.
FBI agents respond to the bank.
When a robbery occurs, you do an investigation inside the bank itself for any evidence, but you also do an investigation outside the bank to look for evidence or any possible witnesses that may have seen this individual, and we did both on all these robberies.
Yet they get nowhere, like they're chasing a ghost. So far, the shootist has stolen at least $44,000. But it's not just about the money. Agents worry that at some point he'll shoot someone.
We're dealing with somebody we thought that was going to become more and more aggressive during the course of his robberies, and consequently more and more dangerous. And it was somebody that definitely needed to be identified and stopped.
After a year-long absence from California, the shootist struck 3 times in 5 weeks. Kelly suspects the shootist must have hit somewhere in that year absence.
He's got to be somewhere else. He's got to be robbing banks somewhere else besides California.
Checking with other FBI field offices, Kelly discovers a string of similar unsolved robberies in Texas, with dates that fit neatly into the gap between California robberies. During one of the unsolved heists, the gunman used the sort of violence agents have feared. In July 1986, a white male with a beard and sunglasses hit a bank in Abilene, Texas. After firing his gun into the ceiling, he forced the manager to fill his bag. As in California, he wanted only cash from the teller drawers and warned against alarms, die packs, or marked bills. The employees followed all instructions to survive, but then...
No! Don't you move! Don't you move! Don't be looking at me! Stay down and see what's gonna happen to you!
The robber ran off, leaving the bank manager writhing in pain from a gunshot to the abdomen.
Go lock the door, go lock the door. I need the police here right away. I'm at Everly Bank. We've been robbed and the manager's been shot.
Texas Rangers, the FBI, and EMTs responded immediately. The manager was gravely injured, but she survived. The other witnesses couldn't provide a solid description. It happened so fast, and they were so terrified, they didn't get a good look at the gunman. The crime scene investigation came up empty, and the security cameras provided only more photos of a robber with obscured features. Special Agent Kelly contacts the Texas Rangers, who are working the unsolved robberies.
Ranger Thomas.
And investigators in the 2 states pool their information. They know the shootist targets branches near highway on-ramps for a quicker escape. The investigators agree the shootist likely has a getaway driver, but no car has been spotted. Each heist is as clean as the last, and no solid leads emerge. The shootist pulls off 6 more heists in Texas and California in 1988. Investigators hoped the media attention would continue. They need someone who recognizes the gunman to call in a tip.
But because of the danger of this individual, we were hoping to get as much cooperation as we could, and we did. Local newspapers would run pictures of this individual. The local television stations ran pictures of this individual.
With the ongoing media coverage, the shootist rises to infamy. His is an astonishing spree. 14 known bank heists in 3 years, all perfectly planned and executed. The shootist is destined to make FBI record books. A cunning adversary like they've never seen before. By 1988, a man called the Shootist has robbed at least 14 banks in Texas and California. Special Agent Jack Kelly.
He was well organized and planned things out well enough where he didn't leave a lot to track him with.
What he does leave behind are bullets fired into the ceiling. If forensic examiners can find rifling marks on the slugs, they can run them through their ballistics database. And if the gun has been used in other crimes, they might get a lead on the gunman's identity. But that's a lot of ifs. Ballistics experts determined the slugs came from a .38 caliber revolver. But there's a problem with finding traceable rifling characteristics.
The rounds that we did find were pretty well damaged. They weren't really going to be much benefit for identification as far as the rifling was concerned.
The Shootist continues his spree. His 17th known robbery is in the San Diego suburb of University City. Once again, no hard evidence remains in the bank. But outside, investigators find signs of just how meticulous the Shootist is. It appears that before the heist, he loosened fence boards across his escape route, so that after the robbery, he could reach his getaway car faster. Special Agent Kelly has chased more than 100 robbers, but this one's the most professional he's encountered by far.
And you had to give him some credit, he was good. But you always had the hope that maybe there was some piece of evidence or some witness, some other part of the puzzle that you could put together.
Yet despite a full neighborhood canvass, agents come up empty. By the middle of 1989, the Shootist has made off with nearly $250,000. And he's struck in at least 10 different cities.
Anytime an individual is mobile and he's able to move from not only city to city, but state to state, it really kind of complicates the investigation because there are multiple jurisdictions.
Kelly brings together law enforcement from around the country. California and Texas FBI agents, local police, and Texas Rangers work together, determined to find that one clue that has eluded them.
The more eyes and ears you have out there at the time, the more likely you are to get a break and catch this individual.
Because the Shootist acts like a professional, agents suspect he has an arrest record for robbery.
One of the logical leads to take is to look for people that just recently are released from prison and maybe going back to their old ways again.
Investigators asked about bank robbers released from prison in 1986, when the Shootist spree began. But it's a dead end. No one recognizes the man. In the surveillance photos, it's difficult to determine what the man really looks like.
And the hair, the mustache, it didn't appear to be real. I mean, it was extremely dark in color.
The task force concludes the Shootist likely uses elaborate disguises. Wigs, mustaches, even makeup to change his complexion.
When we first realized that he was probably wearing disguises, we actually took a number of the surveillance pictures to different costume shops.
Agents show shop employees the photos, asking if they recognize the man or the disguises. But it's another dead end. Investigators analyze the Shootist's bank robberies, hoping to find a pattern. They compare the amounts taken to the frequency of the heists and determine the Shootist spends about $3,000 a week. When he runs low on money, he hits another bank.
You were able to see, not necessarily a pattern, but you knew that he was going to need X amount of money after a certain period of time.
Investigators note the shootist usually strikes on Mondays and Fridays and often robs different branches of the same banking companies.
There are hundreds of bank branches in the general area where he hits. He was just a kid in a candy store out there with trying to select where he wanted to rob next, and it was our job to try to outguess him.
The team sets up surveillance on branches of the banks the shooter seems to favor. They watch on Mondays and Fridays, the robber's favorite days. It's a long shot.
And the problem we had was we had absolutely no idea where exactly it would hit. There were so many branches, so many targets.
Sancho, this is Team 3, reporting nothing.
Manpower is limited. Predicting which bank he'll hit next proves impossible. Bank robbers often use casinos to launder stolen money. The task force sends bank surveillance photos to casino security offices. One California casino responds with a good lead. A regular high roller there looks a lot like the shootist.
They were willing enough to give us their surveillance photos of the individual that they had suspected.
Agents track down the man and interview him.
Special Agent Manuel with the FBI California.
He does resemble the shootist, but he has solid alibis for the robbery dates. Investigators eliminate him as a suspect. Another lead crossed off the list.
We'll be in touch. Okay.
On June 23, 1989, the elusive shootist strikes in Arlington, Texas, his 18th known heist. He has now hit banks over a 1,400-mile area. This time, a teller slips an exploding dye pack into his bag. When it blows, it renders the stolen money unusable. A few hours later, the shootist robs another bank. He's never struck twice in one day. It's a reckless move.
Away from the counter, hands out where I can see him.
Agents fear he's becoming more desperate. Special Agent Kelly fears it's only a matter of time before someone gets hurt.
The more robberies that he did and the more times he shot the weapon, including the time he shot the teller down in Texas, that's a great concern to law enforcement, obviously, because this individual, we thought, had a lot of potential for possibly killing someone eventually.
And the way the shootist operates, he could take his next victim anywhere, at any time. In the late 80s, a team of investigators from Texas and California hunts the shootist, a cunning bank robber who begins each heist with gunfire, grabs the cash fast, then disappears without a trace. As the robberies pile up, the shootist becomes infamous in the western U.S. police community. Everyone's on the lookout. Special Agent Jack Kelly.
Anytime in any jurisdiction that the shootist hit a bank, we would send out our communications to the other offices as quickly as possible, providing them with whatever information we have in the way of maybe some new clues or new witnesses or any better surveillance photographs.
From the photos, the task force determines the shootist likely uses a Smith & Wesson .38 revolver, a handgun popular with police departments. Investigators also notice he indexes his finger on the side of his weapon, just as officers are trained to do. It's an ominous possibility. The shootist might be a cop.
You, come here.
Even if he's not an officer, he seems to know how they operate. Investigators suspect he goes as far as surveilling local officers to learn their patrol routes, and then chooses targets away from those routes to increase police response time. The elusive gunman treats bank robbery like a profession, and his planning has paid off in more than 20 robberies. Investigators welcome the continuing media coverage. They know their best chance of finding the shootist might be through the public's help. One witness in particular provides an interesting lead. After the 1989 heist in Mission Viejo, a resident near the robbed bank saw a man climb into the trunk of a car, which then sped off. He described the car as a red four-door with California plates, but he didn't see the driver or get the plate number. Agents run checks on every car that fits the description in California, but there are thousands. It would take months to track down each car. But the sighting does confirm one suspicion.
When we found out that he was getting into the trunk of a vehicle, we knew that he obviously had an accomplice in these robberies.
On March 30th, 1990, the shootist robs the same Texas bank he hit a year earlier. To investigators, the repeat job means he's getting even more brash, unafraid of being recognized by anyone. By the end of 1990, the task force ties the shootist to 27 robberies that have netted him nearly $400,000, all without a single usable print left behind.
He was very cautious about vaulting the counters, not to touch things. Even going out the doors, he would hit the doors with his elbows or his hip to push them open.
Somehow, agents need to find a way into the shootist's secretive world. They take the case to behavioral profilers at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia.
It's not that it's going to be able to place a name on the individual, but it'll kind of give us a little bit more about the guy's personality.
Studying details of each known robbery, the FBI profiler creates a behavioral sketch of the shootist. Because most criminals start working in their comfort zone, the profiler suspects the shootist is from Texas, where the first robberies occurred. The gunman's level of precision indicates possible military training.
You, come here.
Since the shootist has gone so long without anyone turning him in, the profiler suggests the robber has only one fiercely loyal accomplice. And experience with other takeover robbers makes the profiler believe the shootist will grow more violent as his spree continues. It's possible the gunman will choose a shootout over surrender.
This guy's going to be willing to shoot his way out of the bank or even take hostages to make an escape from the bank if he's cornered.
In April 1991,
Did you actually see a gun?
the shootist expands his turf into Northern California, robbing a San Jose bank of $15,000.
Okay. Did he shoot the guy?
San Jose Detective Sergeant Jack Baxter.
We never found a witness as to where he went, what kind of car he had, did he have accomplices. We had no idea.
This time, the shootist leaves something behind. A partial palm print is found on the counter. But investigators can't make a match. Law enforcement agencies don't include palm prints in their files. The task force is back to square one. 2 months later, the shootist robs a bank in Bellevue, Washington, just outside Seattle. He's expanding his territory.
What do you have? I got off you with Bellevue, Washington.
Seattle was now in the loop. Now we knew that he was broadening his horizons and moving on to other states.
The elusive bandit is one of the most prolific and widespread robbers in modern FBI history. By 1991, the 5-year statute of limitations expires on his earliest robberies, so he can't be charged for them. Agents are racing the clock.
Well, he was a violent multi-state bank robber who was very successful, been hitting every 6 to 8 weeks, and no one had a clue as to who he was or where he was from.
In August, the shootist robs a bank in Los Altos, California, bringing his known total to $474,457. Investigators find a solid clue, a false mustache. It's the first evidence recovered that might be physically linked directly to the shootist. But at the time, DNA analysis is expensive and time-consuming. and they have no suspect profile to compare it to.
Unfortunately, that wasn't of any evidentiary value to us other than the fact that we confirmed that he was wearing a disguise, obviously.
By the end of 1991, investigators linked the shootist to 33 armed robberies in 18 cities. Investigators have nothing. They need a break, and soon. Investigating the longest string of unsolved bank robberies in modern FBI history, agents have little but grainy photos of the man they call the shootist. In them, they see the robber is wearing something beneath his shirt. FBI Special Agent Jack Kelly.
At first we thought it might have been body armor, but under closer scrutiny it appeared that this thing was really covering the lower abdomen and back portion of his body.
It could be a brace, meaning the shootist might have a bad back.
Although he really didn't display that with his ability to vault the teller counters. But these back braces were probably just to support his ability to be able to do that.
Determined to run down every lead, investigators contact chiropractors in the areas near the banks. But they have only blurry surveillance photos of a disguised man, and they can't get to every doctor in 3 states.
There's quite a few chiropractors, but we did cover as many as we possibly could, and we really didn't have any luck.
It's another dead end in the years-long search for the mysterious bandit. 1992 brings 7 more shootist heists, including the repeat robbery of the bank in Bellevue, Washington. New total, nearly $600,000. Seattle FBI Special Agent Don Glasser.
Tried to process the bank for fingerprints, extensive interviews of the witnesses, and of course, our wildest hope would be someone would say, yes, I saw them get into a specific car.
No, I walked by, I saw the people standing out there.
But no one saw anything.
Where are you heading to? Well, I was heading to the other bank. I gotta take a deposit over there. Okay,
There is this concern that you're not serving the public well, that here's a man that's allowed to come in and do a bank robbery and fire a shot, and eventually there could be an accident or an intentional shooting. And, you feel it's frustration that you didn't do everything you could, although you can't think of anything else to be done.
They must stop the shootist before he graduates to murder. During a heist in San Jose, the shootist's luck begins to wane. This time, before he vanishes, the bank security camera catches the best shots yet of his face. A San Jose police forensic artist uses the photos to build a composite sketch of what the shootist would look like without his disguises. Recreating features that are obscured requires a thorough knowledge of human physiology and a remarkable artistic eye. Agents blanket the target areas with the sketch, asking Crime Stopper programs to air it regularly and placing it in dozens of banks. San Jose Detective Sergeant Jack Baxter.
We thought that in order to get this guy, we needed the help of the community. We needed somebody to call in with information, something that they had seen or heard.
On May 11th, 1994, investigators get the break they need. An anonymous caller says he knows the shootist, though it's no slam dunk.
The information was fairly generic. The name that was given was Johnny Williams, or John Williams, and then he also supposedly used the name of Robert Hall.
The caller says Williams is about 40 years old, drives a red 4-door, and has a devoted accomplice, his wife. He says Williams is always armed, has a hair-trigger temper, and has vowed never to be taken alive. In fact, he and his wife have a suicide pact if they're ever cornered. This is a good tip, but the case is far from over.
Those names are so common that there were literally hundreds of Johnny Williams and Robert Halls that we had to go through. And we tried to narrow the list down to the ones that were approximately the same age as the caller had given.
Agents cull through California DMV records and find a Johnny Madison Williams and a Robert Hall that appear in their photos to be the same man. They then compare the photos to the composite sketch.
It was an exact match for the sketch done by our police artist, just as if he had done it right off the picture. So we knew that we had the right guy.
California fingerprints drivers. The DMV fingerprint records confirm Hall and Williams are the same man. Johnny Madison Williams is a former Marine from Texas and has a record for robbery and theft there. Williams' wife, Carol, bought a .38 revolver like the one in bank security footage. And Carol drives a red four-door registered in her maiden name. Investigators find no legitimate source of income, yet the couple lives in a $350,000 house overlooking the ocean in Los Osos, California. FBI Special Agent Jim Wilkins.
The area where he was living was on high ground overlooking Morro Bay. It was an affluent area that actually had one road in.
It's an exposed area where agents might stand out as strangers.
We did not know where Johnny Williams was at the time.
Despite the risk, FBI agents have to check the house. They find a spot they hope is obscured and set up surveillance.
We knew he carried a weapon. We knew he would use it. We also had information from the anonymous tipster that he carried that weapon all the time.
Dispatch, no movement.
The agents see no sign that anyone's at the house. The team watches and waits.
We had made a contingency plan that if we saw Williams returning in that vehicle, we would do a felony car stop before he got into the neighborhood where we had safe fields of fire and where there were no escape routes for him in his vehicle.
Agents watch the house for several days, but the couple fails to show.
Since the end of the shift.
Investigators suspect the shootist is off preparing for another heist. Jack Kelly has a hunch it will be in the Seattle area. The shootist is robbed there in one-year intervals, and the year is up. Kelly contacts Seattle Special Agent Don Glasser.
He said, it's definitely going to happen. He's going to definitely rob in your area, so be on the lookout.
It's just a hunch, but it's all they have. Glasser hits the streets looking for the red car.
I was out of the office and on the street so I could be in the vicinity of the Bellevue area. Getting very antsy, very excited about being prepared to respond to a dispatch saying that there was a 91, a bank robbery.
July 1st, 1994. The shootist strikes again. He robs a bank in Kirkland, Washington, just 10 miles north of where Special Agent Glasser is on patrol looking for him. After his trademark gunshot, the shootist orders a teller to load his bag with cash. As before, he warns against bait bills or die packs and threatens to shoot if she tries anything. The teller accidentally drops wooden paperweights in the bag, which the shootist mistakes for die packs. He's enraged. July 1st, 1994. The shootist commits his 48th bank robbery. A frightened teller angers the robber, but she is spared. The gunman runs out without firing another shot and disappears before police and the FBI can respond. Investigators get word of the latest robbery. Special Agent Jack Kelly's hunch about Seattle was right.
We knew where he was at this point, at least what vicinity of the country he was in the general Seattle area.
Kelly has already flagged Williams' credit cards, so he'll be notified if one is used. Just after the Kirkland robbery, the plan works.
I was fortunate enough to be able to get some information from one particular credit card company that had a recent transaction up in the state of Washington at a particular hotel up there.
Seattle Special Agent Don Glasser rushes to the hotel.
I went up there very excited. I know now we've got some real good information.
The hotel is in Bothell, 10 miles from the latest robbed bank. Johnny Williams used a credit card in the name of his alias, Robert Hall, to check in. But there's no guarantee he's still there.
I drove through the parking lot. I saw the red card sitting in the parking lot, nose in the parking space.
When Glasser calls in the plate number, it comes back registered to Carol Williams under her maiden name of Hawkins.
Hello, sir. How can I help you?
Yeah, let's see the manager, please.
If Williams is still in the hotel, they must be careful not to tip him off or create a barricade or hostage situation.
Listen, what I really need from you is I need you to look at this picture, okay? I need you to tell me if...
The manager recognizes suspect Johnny Williams as Robert Hall and says he and his wife have not checked out.
So I immediately called Jack Kelly back. I gave him the news and suggested he get an airplane and fly north, and he was already packing his bags.
At that point in the investigation, I was very excited. I contacted my counterpart, Jack Baxter, from the San Jose PD, told him they had the guy, not only we got him identified, but also we know where he is. So Jack hopped on a plane, and I hopped on a plane.
Glasser also calls for reinforcements from the Seattle police and FBI.
I'm here in Bothell at the hotel.
We made sure that none of our agents wore radios, guns, raid jackets, FBI, ball caps, any kind of identifying. Ask them to act normal when they were moving around.
Within minutes, more agents and detectives quietly arrive and set up a perimeter.
We made sure that no FBI four-door, as we call them, G-rides, were visible to this guy, that we would use surveillance vehicles. If we happened to casually look out his window, he wouldn't see anything unusual happening outside. We set up locations completely surrounding the hotel. We rented a couple rooms that would give us a base to operate from, so there was no way he would walk out. If he detected us, then he might try and escape. We made sure we had it really covered.
Rather than rush the room, the investigators decide to wait until they get a visual ID of Williams.
Yeah, I'm going to take a break for about half an hour.
We had made sure we had an eyeball on his door at all times.
By nightfall, Detective Baxter and Special Agent Kelly arrive from California. Detective Jack Baxter.
We didn't want to move too fast. We had to have patience, and we wanted to make sure we could arrest him in a way that nobody was going to get hurt.
The agents want to take Williams into custody outside his room in case he has guns inside.
As dinner time approached, we hoped that we'd see him come down and go to eat or something like that, and that we were prepared to arrest him if he did that.
But hours pass with no sign of Williams or his wife. While they watch, investigators have to stay under the shootist's radar and not use police radios.
We had been told he had a scanner, so we had to be careful what we said on the radio for fear of tipping him off that we were there.
It does appear someone is in the room. Special Agent Jack Kelly.
We knew that there was a light on in there. We could see the light, all the drapes were drawn, and we could see the flashing of the television in there.
After 7 years, agents and police may finally have the shootist cornered. After an 8-year search, the FBI believes they have traced Johnny Madison Williams, the shootist, to a Washington State hotel room. A full day and night of surveillance passes with no movement from the room. In the morning, agents devise a ruse to see if their suspect is actually there. They recruit a hotel employee to help. Investigators show the man what their target looks like and ask him to knock on the door to ask a maintenance question and get a good look at whoever's inside. Despite the danger, the employee has to act natural. If If Williams gets spooked, he could turn violent.
I need to change your filters.
When the door opens, the hotel employee asks when would be a good time to change the room's air filters. Detective Jack Baxter.
Our suspect told him that he was going to leave in an hour so he could come back in an hour and change the filters. Well, he ran back to us and positively identified him as being in the room. We had the room secured, so there's no way he was going to get out.
Now they know the shootist is definitely there. And in an hour, he should emerge.
I want everybody in place in 45.
An hour passes. Then 2. Williams could be on to them. But then an opportunity presents itself. Special Agent Jack Kelly.
There was a phone call from that room down to the front desk, and he had asked if he could borrow a typewriter because he wanted to write a letter to someone. And he was asking the people at the front desk if they could bring the typewriter up to the room. We instructed him not to do that.
On the FBI's order, the manager tells Williams he's welcome to use the typewriter in an office near the front desk.
Which he agreed to. Say be down shortly.
The small office is a good place for an arrest, away from the public, no chance of escape. Special Agent Don Glasser.
We quickly go to the room, decide where the typewriter is going to be, do a little quick rearranging of furniture so that we can go into that room once he's in there and not be obstructed by furniture. We have a nice clean path to get to him.
As a final touch, investigators place a sheet listing the Miranda arrest rights in the typewriter. Then hide in an adjacent room and wait for the word from their men outside. After 40 tense minutes, a man leaves the room and heads toward the front desk. It's Johnny Williams.
We saw him walking across the parking lot. Absolutely no question in our mind that is him. We recognized him as if he were our best friend.
He just left his room. He's on his way to the lobby.
This is it. The culmination of an 8-year chase.
He walked into the front desk, and they instructed him to go over to this office.
Mr. Williams, the office is ready.
So he walked behind the front desk and went over there.
Use this typewriter and this extra paper down here. Just page me if you need anything else.
Williams is cornered, cut off from escape. Agents know he is dangerous. They are prepared for the worst. But he is completely caught off guard. Agents take him into custody without a struggle. He is unarmed. Because of the investigators' careful planning, it's a perfectly quiet arrest.
I called him by his true name. I said, Johnny Madison Williams Jr., it's over. And his head kind of dropped.
Next, agents have to get Williams' wife, Carol.
We figured there was no reason to charge into the room, but we'd just wait long enough and she would come down. In fact, she did.
He's on the move right now.
She came out of the room and she was going to her car. And we just stepped out and took her into custody there without incident.
Freeze, FBI, you're under arrest. Place your hands where I can see them. Place them on top of the car. Hands on the car. Put your hands on top of the car. There you go. Hands over the car. Don't move. Don't move, okay? There you go. Use your left hand. Other hand. Move the FBI, okay? You're under arrest.
Once again, a safe arrest. Now agents go looking for evidence.
He provided a consent to search his room. And in that room, he had a couple scanners. He had handy-talkies. He had disguises. He had money.
They also discover the shootist's own notes, a log of all his robberies.
There was a gray briefcase that had a detailed record of the bank robberies, very, very organized. The date, the day of the week, information on the total, the address of the bank, the name of the bank. Very, very, very incriminating evidence.
Investigators find more in Williams' car.
He had 2 pistols, and they were in the trunk of his car. We recognized the 4-inch .38 revolver from the pictures, surveillance pictures. We knew we had the right weapon. He had a 2-inch revolver that we hadn't seen before. Both of them were loaded.
The investigators separate Williams and his wife while they await transport to an FBI office for booking. Williams agrees to talk.
We linked him to, I think, a total of 48 robberies. And when I did the interview, he asked me that. He says, "How many do you have me for?" I said, "Well, how many do you think we have you for, John?" He says, "Oh," he says, "you know, you wouldn't be here arresting me and know my name and everything else. You probably have all 56.
Williams goes on to detail each of the 48 robberies the FBI know about, plus 8 they don't.
The entire interview eventually lasted about 12 hours, and I was writing constantly. I mean, I had writer's cramp at the end of the 12 hours with all the information he was providing.
Johnny Madison Williams took his work seriously, casing banks for weeks, outlining intricate escape plans. He says he wore the brace after injuring his back in a car accident and frequented chiropractors, just not the ones investigators got to. Knowing the FBI would try to trace his disguises, he stocked up in Dallas before he started his robbery spree. He tells agents he studied police routes, radio dispatch codes. All that work brought him close to $1 million in stolen cash, until authorities stopped him. Yet it wasn't just the agents and officers working the case who solved it.
Many times it's the assistance of the public that leads to the capture and successful resolution of these cases. It's very important. I think no more so than now with the terrorism threat. Is that important?
Carol Williams pleads guilty and receives 20 years for her role in the shootist robberies. Her husband, Johnny Madison Williams, the shootist himself, also pleads guilty to the 27 robberies still under the statute of limitations. He is sentenced to 92 years in federal prison. His unprecedented reign finally over.